So thank you very much for coming today. It's my pleasure to introduce Andrea Schneider, who's a professor of law at Marquette University Law School, and her talk here today is part of the Quinnipiac Yale workshop on dispute resolution. And my colleague from Yale, Noah Messing, is here. So thank you, Noah. And the our predecessors are here too. So it's quite delightful. We have Dean Brown and Professor Ayers, who used to run the speaker series and now handed it off to us. But what's special about today is not only is the speaker series being co-sponsored by Yale, it's also being co-sponsored by the 3 schools of health sciences. In fact, the Dean of Health Sciences, Dean Hartman, is here. So thank you very much for co-sponsoring. Also, Dean Lang of the Nursing School and Dean Kaplan of the Medical School could not be here today, but they extend their welcome as well. So we are well sponsored. So back to the introduction. Professor Schneider teaches dispute resolution, negotiation, ethics, and international conflict resolution at Marquette, where she also runs their nationally ranked dispute resolution program. And I could go through her resume, but she sort of poo-pooed that, so I found something better. She writes this ADR blog, where I found this, part of her teaching tool, end of semester teaching tool, where she encourages her students to write recipes for successful negotiation. And she picked out her favorites, and I thought actually this was a good way of introducing her, because I think this recipe says a lot about who Professor Schneider is. She's a magical master negotiator. And what you have is you have a tablespoon of gut instincts, a tablespoon of confidence, a teaspoon of knowing why you're right, the law, social, political, economic norms, a tablespoon of respect for your counterpart, 1 cup of listening, a half cup of empathy for your client and your counterpart's client, a full cup of interest and interests, a 3/4 cup of creativity, 1 cup core skills, listening, more listening, acknowledging, emotion, reframing, summarizing, questioning, and then 1 tablespoon of sass, 1 teaspoon of a smile and a firm handshake. Then you beat on high until mixed. With gut instincts, confidence, knowing why you're right, and respect for your counterpart, and you put that aside. In a separate bowl, you whisk listening, more listening, empathy, interest until blended. Then slowly add in creativity and core skills. Add the mixture of courage, confidence, knowing why you're right, and respect to the bowl of whisked ingredients until you can no longer tell the difference between the 2 mixes. Pour into a margarita glass. Garnish with sass, a smile, and a firm handshake. And there you have Professor Schneider. All right. Thank you very much.
That was great. Thanks, Charlie.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Well, that particular recipe was actually from one of my favorite students, and it reminded me that much of what we're doing is actually trying to make sure that our students are set for success. She wrote that at the end of the last semester when I was teaching her negotiation, and I have to circle back to her because she just managed to there was a unanimous curriculum committee decision to close the journal that she was the editor-in-chief on, and she just negotiated keeping it open. and that is really what it's all about. She just presented to the faculty meeting and got the entire faculty to reverse the curriculum committee, which is no small feat. I don't know about your curriculum, at least your faculty meetings. Imagine your dean might actually practice faculty governance. That's another issue. But we tend to kind of go along to get along. So it was quite the accomplishment for this particular student. So I was actually, I should let her know. Her sass and her preparation actually worked. I am really delighted to be here today. I think I was here as part of the speaker series in the previous building. It must have been about a decade ago or maybe even longer, and talking about some other work. And I am very happy to be back here in your brand new, it's a beautiful building. It's wonderful. And the idea of all of the schools coming together as soon as Jen and Charlie and I were talking, I think probably 9 months ago about this. They said, wait a minute, you are really close to health sciences and medicine and nursing and everybody's together. That is one of my new areas I've really been focusing on, and I would love to see if I could get a presentation that would be interesting for everybody. So let me just find out actually how many of you are from health sciences, nursing, medicine in the room? Okay, so we've got a couple, and then in your past, excellent. And how many law? Kind of so, all right, so not quite 50-50. Health lawyer, excellent. All right, good. So a very nice mix. So you guys are, I should say, my perfect victims. So thank you for agreeing to literally play games with me today. Because what we're going to be doing is, and I think Charlie had a great way of thinking about it, rather than me shopping a paper, I am shopping software. And I am starting to work on some software development on how to think about negotiation and how to teach it to healthcare professionals. And I'll tell you a little bit about how I got into this and to talk about what I'm doing, but really what I want is the majority of our time today is spent, frankly, playing and getting your feedback and ideas for what we do next with this software. So I started working in this area, negotiation, I should say, a billion years ago, it feels like, and thinking about how people negotiate and all sorts of things. And then about 6 or 7 years ago, started focusing particularly on faculty. Now, of course, as a faculty member, I know I've been negotiating my entire existence of how do I get money for my program? How do I get to call it a program and get this nice director title? How do I agree that I can say things like nationally ranked when we don't actually buy into the rankings, right? Every single one of those conversations is a negotiation. So we know that we individually negotiate as faculty members, but I was thinking about faculty writ large, and then had been talking some of this, so you might notice my middle name happens to be the same one as the editor of DSM-5. My dad was chair of psychiatry at the University of Pittsburgh for 25 years, and in talking about faculty negotiations, he was very much a mentor. Because some of the issues are the same and some are different. He and colleagues at Stanford years ago had created a career development institute for young, primarily psychiatry, psychology fellows, young scientists right at the beginning of their career, and brought me in to do about an hour of negotiation. Well, over the course of time, that was 2 hours and 3 hours and 5 hours and now webinars, and I end up going to the same meetings. And it's become very much part of this, part of the federal grant that helps fund this. And the latest federal grant is helping to build software because these career development institutes are really targeting 20 people at a time, which is lovely for the 20 scientists that happen to go through it, and that is just a scratch of the surface. And if we can figure out software that can help train scientists and researchers and others how to negotiate in a way that is interactive and useful, obviously you can get much more reach and be much more helpful. So that's a little bit about how I got into this. And I continue to do a lot of what I would call faculty and health science training on my own as well. The Medical College of Wisconsin I'll be doing in January. I'll be doing the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee's new School of Public Health in December, later this month when I get back. Doctors' organizations sometimes. And I actually love training doctors. I love training scientists, healthcare professionals, because you guys are all really super smart and super intellectual, and you know that you didn't learn this in school. Lawyers think that they learned this in law school and think that they do this 24/7, and when you show up at a law firm to teach negotiation, they're like, yeah, been there, done that, thank you, and sit in the back. It used to be read your New York Times, and now they will just sit on their phone. Lawyer CLEs, not so much fun. Scientist training, totally awesome, because everybody's really motivated, very interested, very smart, and get this, and get why they need it, because of course you've been negotiating lab space and faculty co-authorship and everything else your entire careers in order to be successful. And so that's a little bit of the background in terms of how I got into this. And really what we're going to be focusing on today, this is just the introductory testing to software, thinking about how to make this accessible, to provide practice opportunities. So at the end, we're going to run through a game in negotiation, and everybody gets to make some choices. This is going to be audience participation. I will be turning back to you guys on a regular basis. Obviously, to help with career development, recognizing that software at home is a safe environment. You're not standing up in front of your chair and kind of regularly practicing. Hi, can I negotiate that parking spot again? Can we replay and try that again? Because I totally blew that, right? We don't get to actually do that over the course of our real life. So software at home is safe. It's time effective. Many of the ideas that we're going to be playing with today, you can play again and play again and play again and get different ideas about how you would approach it. Hopefully we think it's effective, and I think it's kind of fun. So that's what we'll see. There are 7 modules that are under development. We're going to see about 2.5 of them. So the introduction is going to show you what's going to come writ large, but we're really going to just be at the introduction. You guys, I'm going to ask you to do a couple of the exercises, and I have a handout for you to play with as we're going through, so you can see how this would work. And obviously I'm going to ask for audience participation. I'm also going to ask for your indulgence, because I panic with the lovely circle of death, right? Every time the videos take a moment or two to load, so you'll just all breathe with me that they're going to load and that there's internet connectivity, and we'll go and we'll work on that as well. But that is basically the plan for our time together. Okay? All right, so I'm going to have some fun here. And
quick question.
Yeah.
Andrea, is this software also allowing you and your collaborators to collect data that you might later be using to write about
Yes.
their behaviors?
Yes, so this should be for full testing, we assume next spring, and then when it goes live, as it were, absolutely, there will be a method of collecting all sorts of demographics, because what I'd like to see, obviously, over time, is who's taking this, and then what are we noticing in terms of patterns. I mean, you know this, I've looked at lawyers in negotiation for a long time, right? Age is a real determining factor, experience in terms of when you have a propensity to negotiate, when you're actually willing to negotiate. And so to see, are there certain kinds of trainings, other demographics that tend to result in either just picking certain styles or success in certain scenarios? Absolutely. So the data collection is being built. Yes, I would not let it be built without it. So that's my kind of that's all nice. You guys want to market it. You have to write my next 10 articles and provide all of the data to me to be able to do that. Ian.
Is this for-profit venture, and what would be the expected cost of producing the 7 modules?
So it is for profit. The grant that we received is, I think, under the small business something, something, something. And so I'm a consultant under the small business something, something. And yes, so it will be for profit. That's a very good question, what the final price tag will be. This company has built other types of educational software, and so I know they spend a lot of time figuring out the marketing. But the grant itself is probably a total of $400,000 or $500,000. I have weekly conference calls, and there are 10 people around the table in North Carolina that I'm on the phone with every week, because as you'll see, there's 2 people who are working on scripts, and people who do sound and the voiceover and the designing and all sorts of fun things. So we'll see. And you'll see, and I'll talk about it in the future, kind of where we're going to go from here. All right, so with that, I'm going to let you guys kind of listen and hear. All right, and then normally it would ask for you to fill in, and you'll start thinking about negotiation writ large. I'm going to, as I said, I kind of filled this in for me. So we'll just go right down, scary arguments, whatever it is. You'll get a little piece of what other people have submitted as well. And you can, anybody who wants to take the time to kind of read all of this, I'm happy to share this for you afterwards, and you can give me more feedback. The exercise that is coming out to all of you is something that we're going to do in the, that I ask everybody to do on the video as well. So I'm going to ask your indulgence when we have moments here and we are in the circle of doom. You can start filling that out as well. Okay, so then it's going to ask you for your goals, and you could fill some in. These are ones that I've just filled in, so you can kind of click and bring them over if you want, if that sounds interesting to you. All right, I'm not interested in negotiating authorship, for example. I'll bring that back over here, but I'm looking for a job offer or whatever it is, and then you can also add in. So it's asking each of the people going through the software to identify for themselves what are their particular goals. And following up with Ian's question, when does this start to become more personalized? The modules that you'll do in terms of skills, you can choose which order you want to do them in, their follow-up videos, and the order of things will be suggested to you based on what your goals are and where you're showing up in terms of your negotiation approach. Noah, sure.
Some of the wording on that, because my professional goals, you have both professional, which is in the left column, and my on the right. So it's a little bit, and it doesn't say, what you might say is drag and drop up to 5 of the goals listed below into the my goals category.
Right.
Just so people are.
Okay, good.
Remove the ambiguity.
Good, good, good. Thank you. Right, and you can also enter your own, obviously.
But entering your own, it won't use that.
So on each of these, you could now click and it would tell you more about each style. This is typically how I, at some point in, whether it's right at the beginning or about an hour or two in, depending on the length of time that I have for training, is something that I will run with all groups. Kind of off the board, to kick it off, to get a sense of how people are approaching. Sometimes it's a directive cue. Think about the last time you were negotiating at work. Think about if it's in-house, what is the problem here in this particular institution, the hospital, the school? Is it a faculty negotiation? Whatever it is. And sometimes it's a more broad, think about the time, Jen has a great cue, that you were negotiating that you were most authentically yourself, and to try to get an insight on how you typically approach conflict of any kind. And you'll see that this is a relatively straightforward, easy tool to do in a group. Everybody kind of does it quickly. Oftentimes I'll have everybody do it in advance and then bring it into the classroom as well. And it's, anyway, a way of getting started and to get a sense of where people are. This is also absolutely something that I plan in terms of data collection, because even just finding out here, right, I mean, anecdotally, I know that when I'm training a bunch of surgeons, they end up somewhere different, shall we say, than when I am at the nursing school, unless, of course, they're thinking about a particular situation. And then they might move themselves. And so that's something else where I think it'll be interesting over time to kind of get some feedback. And you could just, as you go through, and I'm not going to deal with the circle of doom on each of these, since you have I believe you guys have the last page and the descriptions of these as well. So you have a little bit about these particular approaches.
But I think your comment in terms of where we are in life makes a big impact, because if I'm in a position of authority, I'm going to negotiate a lot differently than if I'm low man on the totem pole.
Right.
So I think that has a real impact. As I read through this, I was thinking about, okay, when am I talking about?
Well, right, and I think one of the things to think about is, well, two things. One, obviously context matters. And so in the scenarios that we'll be playing with, they're all about the context, right? Are you negotiating with your chair? And again, this tool is primarily for early career, so they feel completely disempowered. This tends to be a group that I've seen over time that kind of are somewhere between accommodating and literally like roll over and play dead, depending on the scenario. Other times it's much more competitive. And part of the goal of the software is to have you recognize, first of all, you probably have more power than you think, or there are more situations in which you have something that the other side wants, and how do you think about that? How do you prepare for that? And also to recognize, I think sometimes early on we are more self-deprecating than we need to be. Oh, I could never be that assertive. I could never do that. Well, actually, you were plenty assertive last week at Thanksgiving with your family. You absolutely have that skill set. You just don't know and don't think about how to bring that exact same skill set to bear at work. And you need to sometimes. Right? So some of that translational skill building across contexts. And so I think that's exactly right. And that's one of the things. All right, and so I happen to fill this out. And you'll get your own report that'll tell you advantages, disadvantages, kind of repeat. This will be printable for everybody. And kind of get one of these lovely, pretty little score sheet things as well. And so All right, I know I can tell that we are moving rapidly out of time, and I want to get us to the last part of this. So there are different conversations that it talks about styles shifting. There's a segment on how different styles interact, what are advantages and disadvantages, so on and so forth. These are actually each video clips if you want more information. There was a hand in the back.
I just wanted to know if there was something that could be said about the differentiation between the calm and the storm under each type. I noticed that both on here and in the results.
So, and one of the clips will talk a little bit more about how we often shift. It's one of the reasons that I like this tool, and Jen and I played years ago in really thinking about a different tool than the Thomas Kilmann, which is traditional and lovely and static, right? And it gives you the idea that you stay the same through a negotiation. I know I don't, right? Get me a little angry, get me annoyed at the computer, and things will change, right? I'm not very, right? So a little more competitive right now with the volume. That's totally expected. And we want to be training people to think in a more sophisticated and more nuanced manner, that at the beginning of a conflict, you might assess, this is this is something I can avoid. I don't need to deal with this right now. Well, now it's heated. Oh, I think I might have avoided too long. I actually need to get into this, and I need to get everybody around the table. And so there's more in here about how to think about each of those kind of, and there's fun little graphics on the weather getting rainy and stormy and stuff like that, but I'm going to move us along.
And does that include maybe strategies on dealing with someone else that's getting?
Exactly. So one of the clips also talks about, if you're, what happens when two competitive negotiators come together, and that's a lot of fun sometimes, right? It's a game. It's the best chess, or they blow it up and they're both pitching off the end, or how avoiding sometimes can be a very nice defense strategy, because the competitive person oftentimes wants to have a little bit of fun. Right? They need you to engage. If you actually refuse to negotiate, well, they're not accomplishing their goals. And so talking a little bit more about that as well. Absolutely. Yes?
It's the wording thing then. The questionnaire uses the phrase feelings of conflict develop.
Yes.
Which I find ambiguous. Does feelings of conflict mean negative feelings, anger, frustration, fear, or does it mean, hey, we're going now? And those might be personally experienced differently by different people, but also that might make a difference in terms of how I fill it out. If I think, oh, I'm not mad, versus, I'm in for a good, vigorous argument.
Well, and I think it's right, lawyer, exactly, right? We're like, look, I was told to go to law school, and my mom's like, please take those skills and get paid for those, please, right? So, right, like argument, this is fun, this is invigorating. I think that tends to be context driven. And so really thinking about, right, when we're arguing with somebody over a particular situation, is that more enjoyable or fun? Or do we have that automatic negative sense in our brain, and what does that do to us in terms of our negotiation skills? So it's an interesting point in terms of definitely positive feelings are different than negative feelings in terms of our behavior, and at least on the questionnaire, that's going to be for you to determine, right? Rather than me saying, like, assume you're happy, how are you going to deal? Versus assume you're unhappy, how are you going to deal? It's an interesting question. Right.
Early conflict, mature conflict, but also anger, what kind of emotional engagement you have. Thank you.
I like it. Very interesting. All right. What we are going to do for our last little piece of time is to play a game, assuming the Circle of Doom cooperates. All right, so we get to pick an avatar. First one, anybody? Who do we want to pick? Ponytail? Ponytail girl? Okay, we got her. Right, so everybody gets to pick an avatar. This was some of the most ridiculous fun of the entire software development, what they should be wearing and looking like. And you are going to be negotiating several things in your salary. This is negotiating your first job offer. And so it's an early career scientist faculty member. It's going to take a moment to load. And I'll let you read, or I'll read it out loud as well. You've agreed in principle to a starting postdoc position in your field at Strategy University. You're negotiating the details with your prospective department chair, Dr. Leary. And on the agenda are the amount of time for research and teaching, resources including parking, office space, and research support, salary, and benefits. And your objective is to get the best possible schedule, resources, and salary for starting academic job, not necessarily a faculty position. So it might be any kind of academic position. I'm going to move us forward, but under each of these bullets, there's more information, and I'll talk that through as we let our circle of doom load up. But what it will tell you is that the position, for example, your research will require a significant amount of time. You'd like access to private office space for half the time. Research group support will improve your ability to do work. You'd like the position to prepare you for a future position. In terms of the university itself, it tells you that there's a push for new researchers in your area. The campus is undergoing a renovation, so parking is very tight, and parking's atrocious, space is tight. And due to a large undergraduate enrollment, there's significant pressure for postgrads to teach and be advisors. And then the last piece, when you click on salary information to help you negotiate this, your salary requirements, it says your minimum is $40,000 a year. Public records show that the nearby state university offers $45,000 to $50,000 for a similar position based on awards and publication history, and that your university, Strategy University, has a superior benefits package. So this will come up and your avatar will be negotiating with this person. And each time in each of the screens, you will have different choices that you can choose about how to respond. And so it will give you a choice, 3, usually, sometimes 4 different style approaches. You will not get all 5 styles each time. So you'll be asked, do you compete, cooperate, or compete, collaborate, or avoid, and then you'll see the actual verb, the wordage that you can actually pick in order to decide how you're going to respond. And then at the end, you actually get a rating of how you did on a poor, fair, good, very good, and excellent scale in terms of your choices. And the idea is that people can play the game kind of over and over and over and try out different approaches and see which kind of approach tends to make sense. Also, your success is very much based on, and I'm giving you this ahead of the game, if you didn't spend a lot of time thinking and preparing about what's more important to you, right, there are trade-offs and there are hidden trade-offs. So when you push too hard on insisting that parking is next door to your building, your chair has already gotten fed up with you and is not going to give you the extra research assistant or the better space or whatever it is, right? So kind of learning about your priorities and trying to think about that. Okay, so our first choice is a really easy one. I'm going to go with good to finally meet you.
Good to finally meet you.
And you as well. We have just a few details to work out, and then we can get you started. First, let's talk about your schedule. I have you listed to teach 6 classes and help the department with various duties like advising students, in addition to your research duties.
Okay, so, right, that is the opening bid here. You can avoid, you can compromise, right, can I trade, or you can compete, right, be more firm or assertive. I'm going to need more time. Start calling out. What do you guys want to do? Let's compete. Okay.
I'm going to need more time to focus on my research.
What did you have in mind?
All right, and again, you'll have choices, whatever works at this point, if you want to compete and back up. Compromise, here's the trade. Competing, I could teach 3. So what was that, accommodating somebody wanted? Compromising. All right, we're compromising, going in the middle here.
How about I trade 3 classes in exchange for helping the department in my research field?
We can do that. We're growing in your field, and I'm sure we can find ways you can help. Now, let's talk about the resources that will be available to you. Sadly, parking is a nightmare while this renovation is going on. I'm afraid you'll be assigned to student parking for at least the first year.
All right, and again, accommodate, collaborate, compete.
I think we know we don't want to accommodate in that.
Well, collaborate. Okay, let's see.
Aren't there any other solutions?
Like, seriously.
No, I'm afraid not. You'll get a better parking spot once it's over. Next, office space is also limited in the short term. I have
Next.
you slated to share an office with 2 other postdocs.
Okay, so you have an office with 2 other postdocs. Avoid, collaborate, compete.
Just, sorry to break out of the game, but it feels like the move that I would want to make there would be to shift from the minor details that Dr. Leary wants to talk about to, I'm sure we can work out these little details, but let's focus on some of the major issues. Can we talk about the salary? And kind of, but shifting doesn't seem to be an option.
You do not get to talk about your salary first.
Okay. Is there?
Right. Although, again, that's kind of good feedback of like, no, I want my salary figured out first and the rest of this gobbledygook second.
It seems a little hard to get an overview in terms of the sense of the ability to build packages and reach tentative agreements on one thing and where you might have later trade-offs to see how the package is coming together.
Right.
So it's,
No, so you know,
single issue negotiation.
well, you know in advance that you will have, I would say, 5 issues to negotiate, right? Salary comes last, but you have your parking, your space, your teaching load, and graduate assistant support.
But it's hard to, you can't see where the integrative opportunity is necessarily.
Not necessarily. Right. Okay, interesting. Helpful. All right, what do we want to do here? Okay.
I'm going to need private space about half the time. Is there another way I can share space?
We have a faculty member that does a lot of field work. I bet we can set up an office sharing arrangement with her instead. And finally, we have a grad student available for your research group. You'll share his time with 3 other postdocs.
All right. Choices again.
I would compete.
I won't be able to do an excellent job on my research without more help.
I can call in a favor. It won't be easy to find a grad student for you, but I'll get one.
Right. Duly note he gets cranky. I like
The
that.
last
That's my
item on the
favorite thing.
agenda is your annual salary. What are your requirements?
All right, so more choices here. Flexible, collaborating, compromising. Yeah, but I'm glad you all laughed. Don't ever do this. I'm like, don't ever give the low range. So where do you want to go? Competing? All right.
I'm looking for 60,000.
That number is far above the norm for a postdoc position. I can offer you 35,000.
Okay.
35,000 is lower than what I'm comfortable with. How about 50?
35 is the standing offer.
Yeah, he got pissed. It was fun. So you guys can tell me whether I'm being too mean on the, anyway, in terms of gauging when you should compete or things like that. So it'll come up at some point, we hope, with some kind of response. And and then it will tell you how you did, and you can basically play it over and over to kind of see kind of that searching for the collaborative, where are the integrative solutions, as it were.
Is there a difference between gender? Man and woman negotiating?
You mean in terms of how I've fed the results? No, although that's fun. But no, no. I mean, that is actually one of the things to think about, and actually I'm not going to bother with this report.
In some professions, it's very different negotiating for a woman versus a man. In most professions. Yes, I think yes. Yeah, you get it.
Well, I mean, it's different in terms of how you'll be treated, or different in terms of what is offered, or different, the women negotiate differently than the men. I want to go back to slides, but it does not.
Probably all of the above.
I think it's different in terms of what the guy gets mad about.
Slides are just the last time.
I think there are more things that a male will accept from a male than they will from a female, and a female isn't always comfortable negotiating in the same way as a male would be. And particularly in law, you see that in law firms. I mean, it's very...
So you are predicting what I would really like to do once we have this version done is to put in the next round for a federal grant is to do it all on gender. Because that is something that I've studied for a long time. And I think it's also, you know, and then we could have fun kind of ratcheting up the guy and being obnoxious in a variety of ways or not. And then also being much more nuanced in terms of how women phrase their requests. Yes. Because that's a bunch of work that I've done is talking about how do you ask, how are you just as assertive in a way that is more likely to be heard. Well, and to think about that. So I absolutely think gender is an issue. This, on purpose, is not making any of those distinctions, but I do think that it would be useful. And also, I think the push nationally for more women in the STEM fields, there's just a whole host of training that could be done there as well, I think.
I don't know if this is any way to put it in the game, but another thing that's missing from that dialogue is anything she can do for him, any way that she can make him want her, or any leverage on her side other than, well, the implication that I'll go somewhere else if you don't please me. So there's no engagement with all the great things she's going to do and why it's especially terrific that she's going to be there.
Okay, so more selling of her as a way, of the avatar.
More doing things that identify and appeal to what are in his interests other than keeping his budget, time, space, and postdoc.
Okay, so I mean, it's implicit in that she's being hired because she's an excellent researcher, and so to make more of that clear, when I get an extra graduate assistant, I'm going to be able to do more of this.
In a real negotiation, you would say, if you were bold, I think I can get this much done for you if I have this. But if I don't, I will only do.
Right. Okay. That's very helpful. Ian.
To get external validity is very hard, but something that would be fairly easy to do is to see whether people like Charlie Pillsbury, who took this, do they do better than coin flipping or first-year law students? And if expert people who are well-trained negotiators don't do better under your assessment, then I would question whether your assessment is doing well. So it'd be, you can provide this kind of evidence fairly easy. If coin flipping beats humans, that would be really bad.
Yeah, no, that would not be good. Right. And there is, I should say, I mean, obviously I have the pattern in my brain of kind of what leads to excellent and that kind of thing. So, but you're saying the mind reading thing not necessarily working there? Right. Right. So to kind of, to make sure that, okay. No, that's very helpful. So kind of do the experts versus coin flipping versus, and the next, I mean, really we are just in testing now. And so the initial ask, even just this round, went out to my law students who've been trained, ADR students, but also some of my kids in LGL who have not. And so even to think about that kind of thing. Right. Okay. Right. Because boy, would that be depressing otherwise. Right. Okay. Very helpful. Thank you. Jen.
I was thinking about Bill's point about trade-offs and integrative options, and I wonder if you have the right programmers, I wonder whether you could add a sort of an extra phase into the negotiation after you've gone through the 5 things and you have had a chance to see how he responded to each of those, that is suggested by the thing where people moved their goals in and out of the basket.
Right.
Maybe you could kind of create something that is, okay, this is our final deal, and show them what you pushed for, move it out of the basket and put in a less aggressive demand for that item, but then put in a more aggressive demand for another item and see whether he will accept that to arrange.
So almost like a post-settlement settlement ability to kind of say, here's how the package is, you've now taken 24 hours, is there anything you would change? What would you like to go back to him with a counteroffer now that you see you're sharing office space, but you got your own grad assistant, or you demanded early for the parking spot, but you pissed him off apparently with that. So, okay.
Could you also prime them with their own goals before they enter the negotiation, so that they get reminded of their goals as they're becoming the avatar and going into this negotiation? So that way it might help them reset their priorities.
Okay.
And I also think about the level of the importance of word choice and the issue of nonverbal communication. On the word choice, could you give them 2 or 3 options of saying the same thing? And as you pick collaborating or competing or whatever it is, you have 1 or 2 things, but if you were have that and kind of a word choice, that would tune them into the language, the importance of language choices. Right. And
there's going to be a separate, so actually, let me tell you where it's coming.
The other piece is just the body language piece.
Right.
Watch Amy Cuddy or something beforehand.
Well, and the modules are, obviously, this is just the beginning. There's going to be a game with each of the skills. So when they learn assertiveness, there's a particular negotiation. When they work on empathy, the module on social intuition, which is really all about tone and body language, that would be brilliant for really highlighting that particular skill of, okay, you're going to be saying the same thing no matter what in this interaction, but we're going to give you choices of, are you leaning in? Are you crossing your arms? Are you, making eye contact? Do you say it this way? Do you say it that way? And really helping to think about how to teach that social intuition piece, which is great. Right, so this is one of what will be 5 games that are really focusing on different elements. The purpose of this particular game is not obviously that you're getting everything right. It's more understanding strategy choices and how they potentially impact on the other side. Right, and so seeing some of that. Yes?
In this negotiation, are her goals given to the player, or does the player have some choices about
your goals are given. So when you read more at the beginning, it'll be, here's your priority. I mean, it says specifically, parking's not, your research assistant is, that kind of thing.
And is there anything that states the goals of the chairman? And if not, perhaps that could be useful for the person to think about what the chairman says.
Right.
Do you always know that when you go to the negotiation? I mean, I know myself.
Which you could hypothesize about.
But sorry,
this is good.
Sorry, following up, but I mean, it feels like a huge part of this sort of negotiation is information gathering. And so talking about parking first is just a huge strategic, sorry to use the word, but it's a mistake compared to saying, I'm really excited to be here. I've heard wonderful things about your program and I'd like to learn more. Tell me how you see me fitting in. How can I add the most value? Here are some of my ideas. Does that gel with your vision? And so there's sort of the sales job, and then you talk about salary, and then parking comes at the end. So it just feels like the sequence is a little backwards with the major part missing. And I don't know if that fits in elsewhere in the 7 modules, but I'm having the same feeling as everybody else on that.
Well, and so it's interesting. I'm thinking, we have to make it clear that you've at least, you have the offer. You've met before. You've been selling yourself, as it were. So this would be a later. Okay, you're right. If we're not building in for schmoozing, then we need to say this is why you're not spending a lot of time schmoozing and asking about how you fit in. These are the things you already know.
About how excited they seem, about what their search was like, about how they see you fitting in, whether you have unique skills or you're pretty fungible.
Yep. Okay. That's helpful.
But I still think the order is important, because if you're going to pay me my top salary, I'll walk across campus. But if you're going to pay me minimal salary, then I'm going to push for the parking spots. So I think the big ticket items really do need to be up front.
That's helpful.
Or at least that there's an option of trying to redirect things to the sequence that you want.
Right, which would be an interesting additional kind of point of sophistication. I don't know if and it's hard because you want the games to kind of teach one point, not not all of them, but that's right. And so so each of these are these lovely little mini modules, as it were. Carter, you had your hand up.
Yes, one of the things too is having a little bit more knowledge about the needs of the person who's hiring. What skills does she have that is going to fit in with what they're missing?
Right. Okay. So right.
I think most people would look at the needs of the university of where they would fit in to fill holes.
Right.
So to speak.
Okay. Good.
Yeah. Do you have any modules about how young people, especially those who are applying for a postdoc position, would know what are the contours of this discussion? How do I know that parking would be something that can be negotiated? Because I'm looking at what I filled out, and I'm kind of on the assertive side in what my negotiations would be. But I think in that situation, I would definitely be accommodating. I would hear what they have to say and then see what else everyone else was offering, and not even know that they were going to give me a higher salary or that they were going to give me closer parking. So are there any modules to decide to teach younger people to know these are things that can be negotiated in the first place?
Okay, so even kind of thinking about how do you know what's negotiable and what's not? What's on board? It's interesting because this focuses on already the negotiation skills. I know the book that I'm working on that kind of takes some of this and puts it into text, and where my dad comes from this is, the vast majority of young faculty members have no idea what I would give them if they asked. And so that's from his take of mentoring, literally hundreds of researchers over the course of his career, going, here's, you need to ask for this, you need to do this, you need to do this. Don't ask for that. Like, no, right? And how do you know those lines and not? I don't know that we've built that into the software, other than by virtue of kind of looking at the different scenarios that we're offering. So one is on authorship. One is, your internal promotion, right? It's time for you to go from assistant to associate professor, or you want matching. You've brought in a huge national grant. The lab resources, great scenario. You get a grant and you show up and the chair's like, well, that's great, but I only do my budgeting once a year and we're already 7 months into the budget. I'll see you in 5 months and we'll see if we can get you more resources, which is, again, kind of typical. So I rely on the scientists to tell me what the typical scenarios are, but that's helpful.
So I have a question just about just strategy in general. I'm very familiar with the Thomas Kilmann, which is upon which this is based.
Right.
And their quote earlier, they've identified these styles. And generally how that instrument is used is to demonstrate to people that they have often a default, a mode that they go to, maybe 70%, 80% of the time. And that generally the message is you need to be able to use all these strategies. You need to know when to compete, when to avoid, when to compromise, when to collaborate, when to accommodate. And you could say, 20% of the time, you might be right if you just stuck with competing, but you're going to miss 80%. So part of it, what this does is actually, are they prepared? The transition from being kind of explain the style to the idea that in this negotiation they should be employing multiple styles. They shouldn't just go with what they're comfortable with, but really think about, I don't know, just how the strategies are presented to them. That's just my question. Or are they, or can you? I don't know.
So they can pick whatever they want in any of this, right? I mean, the idea is to show them, this is at least some of the typical language that if you were avoiding or you were accommodating or this was what would happen. They're kind of getting to pick, they pick and choose, right? Not all 5 each time. Right. But the idea is that the game would be played a couple different times. And, I've played it where I'm like, I'm accommodating the whole way. Oh, got screwed. Okay. Or I'm going to compete the entire way through and see what happens there. And, and those kinds of things, so that you're really getting to try that out.
So they could practice shifting gears in the middle of the...
Well, and the shift is the thing that ends up doing the best, of recognizing that, you should be firm in what is important to you. And there's no reason to open by caving. I'll do whatever you want. Well, really, why are you even here then bothering to show up? That kind of thing. And on the other hand, when do you end with a compromise? When would you end with something more collaborative? When would you avoid on something that's just not that important? And so it's also picking based on priorities. And recognizing that too should go into your style selection, right? It's not worth competing on every single thing. It's not worth collaborating on every single thing. Like, move on. Just sometimes kind of, you're excited to go out to dinner. Who cares where, right? You cave, you go. And it's all good that way. Yes, in the back.
Yeah, how are you delivering the results, especially if people are taking multiple exams? Are they getting emailed a scorecard or something so they can compare?
No, so this would have, and I just got tired of waiting for the circle of doom, as it were. So there's a report that would have come up right after, and it would say, your result on salary was poor. You need to be thinking about how you would approach the negotiation versus how you ended up, and use criteria or something like that. Or
nothing outside of the software if they want to look at it later on, right?
Well, it's theirs. They own it. So once they're in the software, right, you just go back in. And so, I'm logged in and I continue to kind of play with it. And frankly, any of you guys, I'm happy to share this as long as you, do the little usability consent thing. More than welcome for you guys to be in and play with it yourself. And then obviously there'll be a print component when it's all done. And those are, I know for their other educational software, this company has done a bunch on resilience in high school in particular and things like that. And students get their reports, and that's their expertise in graphics as well, I would say.
So we're focused on the content. Let me just go broader. My understanding is that this is being pitched to health professionals. Is that right?
This will be, yes, early career scientists, researchers, academics.
So there are 7,000 colleges in the United States. It's not clear to me, based on anything I've seen, why this isn't something that every career development office in the country would want for its college students. And
From your mouth to God's ears, then.
So I'm just wondering, rather than pitching as science, if you mix it up a little bit more, and it becomes something, so you've got juniors and seniors, here's how you negotiate for a job. And all of a sudden, it goes way broader than, and then career development offices feel good. They send out a link to all junior and seniors.
Right. And and the short answer is that we got the funding because this is the group that the expertise is on. There's no question that once you've figured out a platform of negotiating a job, we can make that, any company in the world, any law firm in the world, we can start adding in, right, what are particular young lawyer concerns, what's the research that we want our students to do in advance. Absolutely. And I would pick gender, culture. A lot of this at least I know some of the universities I work with, a lot of the concerns is miscommunication and cross-cultural communication, cultural assumptions about how people are supposed to negotiate as well, which connects with the gender as well. So absolutely, I think this is, the book that I have in my head, which at some point would be nice to get to, it's called Get Over Yourself, How to Negotiate Like the Adult You Want to Be. That's my title, and it really is all of this of here's what 18-year-olds, 25-year-olds need to know when they are finally not being protected by their parents. I just sent my eldest off to college, and he's like, I'm sick. I'm like, I gave you every kind of medication under the sun. Pull open your drawer and figure out which one you're supposed to take, right? And yet, we want to baby them, and we baby them to the point that even my law students are kind of like, I got to negotiate. And yeah, it's going to be your first job and your first apartment and your first car and your first grown-up relationship, and you need negotiation skills for every one of those things. Yeah.
Following up on the culture issue then, I think it occurs to me that the labeling of the styles in the questions, especially if somebody's already completed the test, you're going to have sort of anchoring in the style that you already identified as your default style, and even more so if you have a cultural bias to a particular style. Then, although it's true you have to be able to use the different approach that's appropriate in a particular case, sometimes if you focus on what are the words I could say this or this or this, instead of saying, do I want to be competing, do I want to be accommodating, people might be more flexible in their choices.
Well, and I think that's one of the points that hopefully comes across. That'll be an interesting thing to test. we skipped over a couple of the videos after you've taken the exercise, which specifically talk about the importance of shifting style, of understanding yourself and not being kind of stuck with that, and recognizing that you've got to pick and choose. I think if there's any lesson that comes across in the game, it's that, you know, whatever you started with, you've got to be thinking about different approaches. And you're right, the anchoring, I mean, it's really the words that are the important part of it, and not the label. I mean, labels suck.
With the labels, and one group without the labels, and see if they come up the same way.
Interesting. Thank you.
That's an interesting idea. Not have a label, but just have the way it's phrased.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, phrased in
characterized
a competitive way,
Yeah.
phrased in a collaborative way, phrased in an avoidance way, without knowing what label you're.
Right.
I have a small edit, but it's kind of a big edit.
Okay.
I think this is, it says accommodating is low assertive, low empathy.
Yes, you're right.
That is-
Yes.
Okay, so you know that.
Old yes, yeah, bad copy.
Good.
Exactly, old version. Yes. Yes.
So going back to the language piece, can you run it two simultaneous versions in your testing to see if, because you're looking at you know, a very short interaction, and this actual discussion might be 15, 20 minutes, half hour over all these issues, but they're doing it in 15 minutes through these choices. If you do something like testing for vividness bias, if he says, I have, you know, you have shared office space, and you have shared office space on the second floor looking over the pond, and just see what impacts those have on people's choices, because there are all these biases that can creep in that people may or may not need to be aware of. It gets much more complex over time.
Right. Interesting. Okay.
Another metaphor beside anime is quest video games, where the protagonist goes on quest. Assassin's Creed is one of them that is very parallel to this, that you're trying to find somebody, and you go into the local tavern and you interact. You choose which person to talk to, and then you interact with that person, and you have 4 choices. They ask you a question, you have 4 choices to respond,
Right.
and different responses are more likely to elicit the information or not. And indeed, another kind of scholarship you could do is whether these video games are well programmed from a negotiation standpoint, because do they being always?
So I have to be playing all these video games?
Well,
that sounds like a terrible thing to do.
Well,
Academic Creed.
in fact, it's the coding of them as being
Right.
accommodating or
Absolutely.
claiming competing styles, and does always being competing work. I think they actually like this. They are programmed not to be always being always competing isn't the best style, and so it would be interesting if instead of playing your game, you should have people play Assassin's Creed more often.
I love that as like standing up and saying, and in your free time, seriously go out and play some more video games, people. Relax you too.
So, 2 quick questions. One, is there a way to make this a competition? So instead of the person who's hiring.
I love that. And I want to win and collaborate, right?
No, I don't mean like one versus the other, but so instead of having the computer play the role of the hiring scientist, that somebody else gets to pick their, not just animate, but they pick the same person, but with 1 or 4 different sets of body language, very firm, kind of more accommodating, and then they have a set of choices. Do you try to begin the negotiation? And they have instructions too. You really want this person, but they don't know that they're the only person who has this particular skill set or something, or that they're the third choice because the only other 2 people have already passed, or what you know that you have a budget of this would be a great outcome, this would be a bad outcome, because then it's not. It's more. There's more movement. That's one idea. The second is this reminds me a lot of books I read as a kid, the Choose Your Own Adventure.
Absolutely.
But in those you never know what the right. I mean, what I would always do is go back to the place where I chose death, and then see what would happen if I had chosen the other option. And so I just wonder, at the end of this, does it say you received a firm offer of $35,000. You may have noticed that the body language tightened up when you mentioned 60. You should there have dropped to 40 of those options. A better option might have been to ask for 50 to show compromise without coming down too far. But so like
no, so it doesn't actually walk you through the pathway. It just assesses you, it grades you, and then assumes that you're going to try again to figure it out. In part,
I don't want to give away the answer. To what degree do you want it to be evaluative versus instructive? And it strikes me that if your target market is junior people, then you would want to provide some instruction as well. Or that's one thing.
Right. I like that. How would you say that? Have the report provide the kind of the pathway?
Yeah, show participants the optimal strategy once they complete it.
Right.
Have you looked at how often people go back to replay when they have a course?
You guys are literally the first feasibility study.
That might be an indicator.
I mean, like that's,
Do that or not.
you know,
Go back
and play it again and again.
experiential learning, get to a different
Right.
place.
No, I just tortured my research assistants with this so far, and they have had a ton of fun playing through it over and over. But you know, they're mine. They're law students. They're right. Well, right, and it does. I mean, it's the excellent, and you're like, you know, you did great, da 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 kind of thing. But yeah, that would be that'd be fun to kind of test. As I said, it went out yesterday with the last class in a fun way to study for finals and IRB approval. Went out to about 100 law students yesterday or Wednesday. So
I was picking up a thing I think what Noah was suggesting, and that kind of not so much competing, but sort of interactive. I mean, the notion that you create the boss in this case, the department chair, with different. They might be a competer. They might be a collaborator. I mean, you could then have negotiating with different negotiation styles. I wonder.
well, and we hope that in the variety of games, again, there's going to be 5 games through, and so you'll get different kinds of interactions with your chairs or with your peers or whomever it is. The authorship one is
Almost like a slow-moving chess match in which the teacher, of course, each student could make a move each week or each day, and then the professor can sort of go through and submit his or her response, and you know, kind of look at the cumulative results and what worked and what didn't.
Jen?
Along those lines, we weren't seeing the empathy game, but it strikes me that if you had most of these coming where the person you are playing is a junior, empathy, have the opportunity to be the person you are negotiating with. And go through it once as yourself, but then being able to go through where you're watching all of the choices that you made as you went through, and being able to see the process that other person is working through as they hear your competing response or your collaborating response. Right.
so that's interesting too, right? A more transparent kind of on the other. Okay, that's helpful. Yeah, no, I am, as I said, very curious. I've been spending a lot of times on the scripts, kind of that's where we are anyway, on the scripts for each of the skills of empathy and assertiveness and flexibility, social intuition, and they're all extremely short. I mean, it's mind-blowing to think that you're going to teach anything in a 3-minute whatever, but okay, this is what they do. And I haven't really played with the next round of games, but I like that.
To the instructive quarter, to Carter's point also, if you have an opportunity to sit in the mind of the person with whom you're negotiating, that would also be instructive of the things that aren't currently on the table, the things you hadn't thought of that are on the table, the options, to your father's point, what they could have if they just asked kind of instead of having a strict educational component in that situation, it would still be a part of the development empathy as opposed to
Cool. Thank you.
So sadly, we have to be competitive and assertive here. So we've reached the 1:30, actually a little bit past. Of course, I'm sure Andrea has some more time. So if you want to stick around, and time for small group discussion, but some people have already begun to leave. They've asserted themselves. You are now free. If you're an accommodator, you can now go. You have permission. But we thank you very much for coming, and we thank Andrea. Let me give her a big hand.
Thank you.